April meeting of the Franklin Village Planning Commission, and we can start our roll call on our right here.
Paul Bregman, present.
Sarah Greslick, present.
Pete Halleck, present.
Quincy Harrison, present.
So, I guess, trying to look at the right time to let you introduce yourself, Quincy, and I think we can do that now.
Sure.
Our newest member. Maybe you could say a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what you like to do, what your hobbies are,
Yeah.
why you love Franklin,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so
in less than 10 minutes.
yeah, less than 10 minutes. I'll do a 2-minute maybe. Yeah, so I've lived in Franklin, it'll be 12 years this summer. So I went to school at U of M and then law school at Wayne State. So I was talking about, I'm a patent attorney.
Yeah.
So I work in all different types of intellectual property field of law. So my wife and I, we have 4 children that are 4, 6, 8, and 10. So we have 2 Labradoodles, we have 4 chickens. We're one of the chicken people in Franklin. We can have up to 18, I guess, but we're not going to get that close. We have plenty of eggs, but yeah, native to Michigan, was born in Rochester Hills, so I've been local for my whole life. So.
Cool. Welcome aboard.
Happy to have you.
Yeah.
All right. So we need to adopt our agenda, unless anybody has something that they would like to add or omit or amend. Can we get a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt the agenda as is.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. So I don't think we have, did we get meeting minutes? Okay. Are they coming out of the oven pretty soon, or will we get them next week? Next?
Minutes weren't attached in this packet.
Yeah, I just saw the agenda, yeah, and then
So we can do them.
We'll add them at the next meeting if that's okay. We'll go ahead and
That's fine.
make sure that's reflected in the minutes for tonight, and then we'll make sure the March ones come back at the next meeting.
Okay, great. No problem.
It happens.
So, David did say that, David Solly said he wasn't going to be able to make it tonight. So, could try and do a little bit of an overview of the council meeting and the relevant topics. I think for me, the most interesting thing was discussion of the green project. I think that was basically the moniker.
Yeah.
And the possibility of doing some grant applications, improvements, upgrades, life to our green/village. And I thought that was pretty exciting. I hope that the Planning Commission can contribute to something like that. I think it's in our wheelhouse. Sort of in the master plan vein, land use vein. So possibly we'll be seeing more of that. I hope it continues to develop. Aside from that, the pre-meeting was the budget workshop. And the burn ordinance was essentially, I believe, given its second reading.
Yeah, so the burn ordinance from the draft that had gone from you guys to council, council had 2 or 3 very small edits initially. They were mostly grammar or just a little bit of clarification. And then it came back to council this week for its first reading, in which time Councilmember David Solly suggested adding in some enforcement to the burn ordinance under the permit, which would allow us to collect a fine if you are violating and operating without a permit. So at the next meeting, it will be technically its second reading. However, that change will be incorporated. So you'll see the fine will start at $25 and increase there based on number of violations. But we're hoping that that will help encourage residents to continue to apply appropriately for the permit. In addition, they did their first review of the small cell tower ordinance that you guys have put in a lot of work on over there. because they're struggling a lot with some of the same obstacles that we had when it was in planning, which is most of that ordinance is guided by state law. There's very little that we have a say in Franklin. But there were a few areas where we could add a caveat or a little bit more regulation, and we did. So council had, at the end of that meeting, they've requested that Chris just put together a small report that highlights those areas. Not all the changes that were made to bring it up to state law, just the little areas where we had some leeway or possibly had the ability to put in a firmer regulation. So at the next council meeting, it will be the first reading. They're gonna go ahead and look through those, predominantly, again, focusing on the areas that we could kind of control and have oversight in that ordinance, not necessarily everything, bringing it up to code, because they trust the long discussions that you guys have had with, and all the work Chris has done to bring it up to code. So I would think that those are probably some of the biggest points from this week's council meeting.
Yeah.
But Pete and I were just talking a little bit more about this proposed green project, and basically what we're doing is just looking at this wonderful asset, all of this green space behind us, including the ball fields, thinking into the future about how we want to sort of program the green and how we can work collaboratively with the FCA and the Ball League and everybody to get the substantial funding, whether through a government appropriation or through a grant. And we're thinking, upwards of $1 million to redo tennis courts, ball fields, improve draining around the ball fields, potentially put in some work into the barn to maybe make it accessible for some sort of concession stand. It's all still in its concept phase. So we're just brainstorming. At the council meeting, they decided to form a committee of council members to review that. And I talked to Pete about how as we move forward in those negotiations, I'll definitely be communicating with the planning commission, because your input will be valued as we continue to collaborate and sort of get that narrowed in. So more on that to come, but definitely exciting stuff and ways for us to all work together to make Franklin the best. I don't really have anything other than that.
All right, good. I think that
Take it.
covers all the bases as well, that I thought was noteworthy. And there was some discussion of the master plan, and, a lot of new families coming in, and do they like the master plan? And has the master plan that we've reviewed here, boy, went real deep 5 years ago, and then went again, right? Maybe-
It was 5 years and we finally got it approved. It was time to do it again.
Exactly.
So,
When Connie was here in 2012, 2013, we all spent, good months. She would give us our homework assignments, and that meant we had a month to read each chapter, and we did it a little differently that time around. I don't think the master plan is taken lightly. I feel like the things that have been there for 40 years are there because we've all wanted them, and we all feel they would be good, positive things. So, hopefully, I think the green plan and things of that nature, I think they're things that we can contribute a lot to. And boy, the council has a lot on their plate, right?
They do.
And Megan, boy, the amount of work you're putting in, it's incredible.
you.
I think we have a lot of eager people here who are loving community members, and I think there are things we can do to help. Chris, I know you're, got that in your heart, the love of planning urban centers and develop them into the best that they can be. So hopefully we can do that a little more. All right, our zoning liaison, and she is not here. Is there any zoning relevant matters? Quincy, do you have
I
any?
was on zoning, we didn't have anything that we discussed the last time.
all right.
I think the only issue ended up going away, based on permeability of soil,
Okay,
or driveway stuff, so, yeah. it
Yes,
wasn't-
the applicant withdrew his, variance request because it was determined that he did not exceed what he needed, so.
They thought his driveway had asphalt under the gravel, so it counted towards the impermeable surface, but it didn't. So once you took all of that out, he had plenty of space to add his patio in the backyard.
I see. Okay. Well, all right, fair enough. Our budget and expense report, looks like we're fairly,
Oh, wait, communication.
Communication.
I actually
I
have something
skipped
this month.
over that.
I know, because normally there's no.
I know. So, yeah, here we go.
The one time.
I know. It's okay. So I watched the council meeting and I was really impressed by how Meg really talked about how great of a job that they have done. I think her working with council and coming up with their own sort of communication plan and working at how to look at that. So I don't really think that we need the communication subcommittee here, but in the same vein, I think that we have said as commissioners that we are hoping to communicate more with the other groups within Franklin. So whether it's historic or Main Street, I know you did a lot with them during the Pickering situation. And so I think going forward, there won't be a whole communication subcommittee, but I am going to make a concerted effort going forward to try to attend some of those other meetings in order to bring some of that knowledge back. And I think otherwise you have it handled on your end, for sure. You did a great job explaining all of that. So I think that is how I would like to handle it going forward, if everyone is cool with that.
Yeah.
If I could
Absolutely.
add, Sarah, I think that that's a great input there, and I was actually just talking to Pete a little bit about Main Street. So Main Street as a board, I can pass along when those meetings are. You're all welcome to join, just as, you know, contributors, but not necessarily board members, right? Unless you want to become a board member, then I can find some space for you. But I really think that moving forward, my vision for the village is to really bring all the silos together so we can start collaborating better on projects moving forward. So I love to hear that you would be interested in, you know, as a group getting more involved in some of these other groups or relaying messages back and forth. And then I would say that I already attend HDC meetings, I'm at ZBA. So if there's something in planning and we're like, you know what, this is important, we wanna know what HDC's thoughts are. If somebody here wasn't able to make a meeting, I am more than happy to incorporate that in my administrator report at any time. I'm really working hard to be better glue between council and planning and HDC, just so that we can be communicating a little better. So I'm open to suggestions if you have them, or if you have things you want to communicate that I can help you with, I'm here to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, so much of it is, you can have a lot of systems in place, emails, newsletters, but a lot of it really is, you know, tell us what's going on, go talk and tell and have conversations. So that's great, thanks. I think we'll be able to turn it loose into the environment and not have a report every month on it. Yep, all right. So now the budget and expense report. I see our last update here shows February 25. I mean, it certainly looks like we're on a good trajectory. Anybody have any comments or observations on our budget right now?
Only question I had was the $90 just for the master plan, like that in February, that was just being sent out, or?
That was probably related to, did you work on the master plan at all? Maybe with the memo in February?
I don't recall.
I'm only asking because I thought we were done master
I'll have
plan in
to look
terms
into
of
it.
stuff
We're
like
still, the
3
master
months
plan
ago.
is still in its review period. So then when it's done there, it will go back to council for its adoption. Once it's adopted though, I think it's really important that we do some community engagement around the master plan. I want to add a different section to the website that has a master plan there. I want to, pull out some key highlights from it, maybe do a one-pager on it and that type of stuff. I'd like to have printed copies of the master plan, just a few available at the library, available over here. So in regards to your budget, as we move into our next fiscal year, which will begin on July 1, I am going to continue to keep some space in your budget for the master plan, even though it's not due for another update. I'm gonna keep some funds there so that while we're moving through, start thinking about different ways we can engage the community around the master plan and use it. And then if we have an idea on how to distribute some information, we have a little pocket of funds to do so. I think the master plan, especially in Franklin, is so important. It really helps frame the way that we do things over here and why we're doing them, and that it has this vision, especially since we have these historic roots. I want to make sure that copies of that are available and that we're engaging the public with it. So it's not like we spend all this time doing all this work and then it just sits in the bottom of a filing cabinet type of thing. So that speaks more to your budget moving forward, not necessarily this one, but just know that I'm doing budgets right now and I plan to keep funds available for us to creatively think of ways to integrate the master plan into the community.
Okay.
That's
That-
great.
that- Perfect.
I have one quick question on the budget. So I did read through the packet, and in this future planning activities document, I saw this part about the capital improvements plan. So is that going, I mean, I haven't heard much about it, honestly. Is that something we need to be considering or thoughtful of when we're making our budget in just terms of anything else that we have to do for next year?
I budget for all of the capital improvements in my main budget, not in your planning budget.
Right.
So, but I'm really happy that you pulled that out. So historically speaking, Franklin hasn't really put a lot of time into a capital improvement plan. Last year was the first time that you can see in our budget, we have a little space holder for some potential projects. This year, those projects are changing, but the detail in the capital improvement plan is staying the same, and that's based on timing from when I got over here and the amount of time that it takes to build that. However, my goal is to start in the summer building a traditional capital improvement plan, and that will be something that I'll definitely want planning commission's involvement. It might be something we form a subcommittee on, or just take, or I provide updates and we share, we can figure out the logistics of that. But I think it's really important for the village to start thinking strategically to the future. I think that there's a lot of good insight here on the planning commission. Just in order to do that to the level that I think that we should, I didn't have time to incorporate it in this budget, but I'd like to start working on it so it's ready to go for the next one. So I'm happy that you brought that up. More to come on that, and I'll definitely be looking for feedback and involvement and way to work on that. But any funds that would be necessary would come out of my general
Awesome.
fund.
Thank you so much for that. I read it and I was like, this is really an exciting idea, but I hadn't heard much about it, so thank you so much for that update.
And Sarah, where are you finding the
Right,
capital
under
improvement language?
It's on
Future
this,
planning activities?
yeah, for the planning commission annual report, it's on the future planning activities. It's the other side is the master plan activity.
Okay. Because, yeah, I don't know, Chris, could you tell us a little bit? So right now in our master plan, do we have a capital improvements?
No, that's, well, we're going to get to that under new business, but
Okay,
I can tell you that under state law, when a community does a master
Yeah.
plan,
yeah,
they're supposed to do a capital improvements plan. It's the plan commission's responsibility.
okay,
And then they pass it on to the village council. Obviously, they can't do it themselves. They have to have the involvement of the village administrator and others,
yep,
because you can't do something like that in a vacuum. But it is the responsibility of the planning commission to sort of pull it
yeah,
together.
yeah. That's what I happened to be perusing, some planning commission YouTube videos. Oddly, I don't know what's wrong with me, but, yeah, and I'm looking, and the importance of having the capital improvement section in your master plan, and it occurred to me that just having a document out there that you have over the years, people can look back and say, yeah, this has been,
It's
in place.
supposed to cover a 6-year period. And
Okay,
then the first one is always the hardest one to do.
right,
And then if you do it, the first one, and then you update it annually
right, you can see how it evolves.
easy to do.
Yeah, yeah,
after
Yeah,
that.
once we establish this, it'll just be in our routine to update every year, like Chris said. But to get it started takes a lot of heavy lifting. We gotta think really strategically and assess the state of our current infrastructure and kind of provide values for that. So it does take some time. So in my head, I pass the budget through council in June. Maybe July, August, we start talking capital improvement.
great. All right. So with that, do we have any public comments? Feel free to speak now or wait until we get to the topic, but however you'd like to do it.
Yes, my name is Natalia Shoup, 32334 Franklin Road. And Before I get to my public comments, I would like to ask, is there going to be a discussion under old business for setbacks and regulation of the fences in R3 Historic District?
Yes, that is on our
So
agenda.
that is on the agenda?
Yes, it is.
Even though it was already motion passed in November, right? Okay.
It's a
So-
different,
Right.
different,
It's different?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how different, sorry. So I'll just then go with my public comment.
okay.
So I would like to address this issue that is currently on the agenda and accompanied by report by McKenna. The Planning Commission serves an important role, including reviewing matters and directed by the Village Council. However, after the October 2024 council meeting, there was no direction given to broadly examine all zoning regulations related to single-family residence, detached garages, and fences in R3 Historic District. In fact, during the most recent council meeting, it was clear the council members were unaware of this item titled Consideration of the Zoning Regulation for Historic R3 District. When Mr. Halleck asked for clarification, only the village administrator seemed to know what it referred to. She appeared visibly upset and stated she would explain later. I have reviewed the meeting's minutes and watched the videos. The only two directives from the previous council were, in September 2024, the council requested that the Planning Commission determine whether sections of the ordinances might need to rule for R4 lots, not R3. In October 2024, the council requested a review of fence setbacks in historic R3 district, and that was the extent of it. The newly elected council has not issued any directive regarding further review of R3 zoning regulations. Following that October directive, the Planning Commission did review the fencing regulations and setbacks in historic R3 district. At November 2024 Planning Commission meeting, McKenna presented a comprehensive report with findings and recommendations. A motion was passed supporting McKenna's conclusion that no changes were needed to the fence regulations. Their report found no defect in the existing regulation that would warrant an amendment. The commission then instructed Mr. Duzen to send a letter to the council summarizing this decision. Today I received a copy of that letter through FOIA request. I have a copy for everyone. We know this letter was received by the village administration at December 2024 meeting when Mr. Halleck asked if the council had seen it. The village administrator responded, not yet, stating the agenda had been full. However, the letter has still not been formally provided to the council. Without receiving that letter, the council has not had an opportunity to discuss or issue any new directions to the Planning Commission regarding fence setback and regulation in the historic R3 district. You may ask why this has happened. The answer is concerning. The village administrator appears to be attempting to present this issue as an old business to the Planning Commission without the council's knowledge. This could be a way to cover up prior failures to enforce ordinances and to stop the recent construction of illegal fences in historic district. Those who attended the October and November 2024 Planning Commission meetings may recall the statements made by my husband and me. On March 31st, 2024, our neighbors, Heenans, at the corner of Franklin and Carroll Avenue, completely removed a 6-foot privacy fence and constructed 2 new 6-foot privacy fences, one facing Franklin Road and one on a lot between our properties. Some panels and posts exceed 6 feet. The fence between our homes was built less than 2 feet our house and windows.
Natalia, can I ask?
Yeah.
I would like for you to be able to finish, but we do have our 3-minute time limit that we'd like to observe. If you're able to wrap up fairly quickly, if you could do that, that would be appreciated. We will be addressing this on the agenda, so we will have time to talk a little more about it, but
Okay, so then I'll go back this when it's on the agenda, right?
We can, we
as
can.
my comments.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go then really to the, this is the first time actually someone has been interrupted at the Planning Commission in regards to the minutes, but okay. Then my concern is to McKenna reports. The original report provided at the November 2024 meeting was dated October 29, 2024, and included fence-related findings and recommendation. I have copies for everyone. Some of you have not seen it. However, the new version of the report now being provided, also dated October 29, 2024, contains no such recommendations. Curiously, the maps and calculations within the new October report that you have now, dated February 23, 2025, indicating that this report could not have been created that last fall. It contrasts the original report presented in November, including a map creating on October 7, 2024. The timing makes sense. So you have a completely two different reports, two different conclusions and suggestions. Please see those dates. So the question becomes, why wasn't the newly revised report presented at the November meeting since it was dated October 29th? Same date as the other report. The answer is clear. This version did not exist then. It was likely prepared early 2025 and withheld until new planning commissions were seated, presumably to confuse and mislead them. The village administrator might not have expected our family to attend the council meeting last Monday, or for Mr. Halleck to raise the question. As I stated, the council was confused.
So Natalia, we do enforce the rule. We have had cases where we try to keep our, observe the time limit that we have established for a long time. If you could make a final closing comment, that would be appreciated. We will be moving on, and we will have an opportunity to contribute more.
Okay,
To be able
my
to do that.
final,
Yep.
just few sentences. It seems the village administration very actions for me to end this. In conclusion, the village administrator does not have the authority to direct the planning commission to review the act or matters. The village council can provide that direction. There was no direction provided to planning commission by the council, therefore, this should be postponed until they review that letter, since it was not provided to them since November, and then they can make a decision what to do next, since we have a new council, as everyone is know. And at the council meeting, my husband provided details, this is the last two sentences, and formally requested a full investigation to these ongoing issues. For everyone who wants to truly understand the situation, I urge you to watch the recordings of the October and November Planning Commission meetings, as well the most recent council meeting, where these concerns were raised. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Natalia. So with that, we can move on to old business. Perhaps, so this is where we'll be discussing the zoning regulations for the historic R3 district. I feel that maybe you could give us some background.
Yeah,
All right,
sure.
and we can, I think we can continue to move forward and.
Yeah,
discuss.
absolutely.
Okay.
So the first thing is that this came back to you at request of your village council, of President David Goldberg, who had quite a lengthy conversation with Chris Dusen regarding the first time that we did the analysis of the R3. The scope of that project, due to, so you have to think about who your council liaison, and we went through a transition there, we got a newly elected council. So during the time when this R3 comes to Planning Commission for review is actually before I start working with the village. So it would have been, I don't know, say September, August, somewhere in there. It comes over, and Planning Commission understood it to be looking at fence regulations. That was a breakdown in communication, and that was really the result of, you know, a liaison, a council liaison who was a little unable to articulate the council's wishes. So they received the report and all the analysis that was done in the fall to fences, and that was great, except that wasn't exactly what they were looking for. They wanted to expand that scope of work. They were trying to look at R3 in general. So the reason that this comes back has absolutely nothing to do with me as an administrator. It is your council that decided that they didn't quite get the scope of work they were looking for initially. Had a long conversation with Chris Duzen, our planner here, about what they were looking at. And that's what leads us to bringing it back today and this updated report from Chris. I'm going to turn it over to Chris since he was on the conversation with David, and see if there's anything else there that you'd like to add.
No, I think you pretty much summarized it. I think what the council was looking for was a broader view of the R3 regulations and how they affect development in the R3 district. And it's a unique situation in the R3 district.
Yep.
And it's explained in my letter.
So before we get to your letter,
Yeah.
I would just add that, you know, in my review of this, I feel that it does have merit on itself, and these are worthy issues to address, and, you know, gives some thought about, you know, this special part of our village. So I guess if.
I got comments as well, because I read the report. Like, this is very good, it's very well thought out. And I understand the fence analysis that was done, I understand the breakdown, the communication on that. But what my understanding now is this is not about fences, it's about being able to grow the historic district by rezoning what it
Well,
currently is.
not rezoning, but it's taking a look at the regulations, like the setback regulations, and saying, well, do we need, for example, on the side setbacks, a total of two
Okay.
25-foot setbacks? Because that's hindering
The lots
people
are so
from
small
developing their
Exactly.
property.
Limits their ability.
Okay.
Or
So-
do we need a
so developing-
40-foot
developing
rear
where they
yard
currently are.
setback?
Okay, developing where they currently are, but that being said, majority of the residents have lived in these homes for a very long time. And I'm saying now it's becoming an issue, why it needs to be brought up, why we need to expand, like, their boundaries.
Not just that, so you have to think about how small these lots are.
They're
Most
very
of-
small,
they're
but they were purchased as is.
They were,
And-
but when these homeowners try to make improvements to their lots, whether it's even just, you know, improving a structure that's already there or adding something new, they find that they run into a lot of issues. So I'd like to stop you right there and say, no zoning ordinance has been suggested. This is a study.
Okay.
Your council is just requesting information
Okay.
about an observation of the current lot sizes, what sort of obstacles we see in those, how consistent they are.
But with as isolated as those things are, the people that want to do more to develop their properties, wouldn't that be a request for zoning for variances to do that versus rewriting or reevaluating the current zoning?
Absolutely, and that is the process.
But
That's
why is
not-
it coming to us as opposed to?
Well-
Well,
having
that's what we
people
can
there?
discuss.
You have,
Okay, I just want to get the whole picture, because like I said, I read it, I'm just like,
We're not suggesting, this is a data, it's a study, it's a
Okay,
data
okay.
gathering, and no one has proposed any zoning changes.
Okay.
So this would have came to you before I was an employee of this village, and it's just to try and understand the difference in these tiny lots in R3s. No zoning ordinance has been suggested, and at this time, if anyone needed to make a change, that would be a ZBA
That-
issue,
that's what I thought.
absolutely.
So, because as I was reading, I'm just like, I don't, okay, we're analysis.
Yeah.
but
Okay,
on the other
okay.
hand, let me say that when you do have multiple nonconformities,
Yeah, that's
Related to
that's
a
a big part
particular-
of the issue, yeah.
Well, the
that
nonconformities.
suggests there might be some sort of a defect in the ordinance.
Okay,
And that's what the data sort of points out in some cases.
but were these in these cases that are here, were these nonconformities existing prior to the ordinance?
That I don't know.
Were they
Oh,
just,
I wouldn't know that without.
right, I mean, many of them were pre,
They were
Pre-ordinance.
Like some were pre-church. Some
Yes.
some of these properties were
Right,
before the church. So
but
it's like,
it's still, it's a nonconformity.
It's a non-conforming, it's.
Right.
Okay, so we're looking to see what's broken, because isn't the sentence
Yeah,
here?
or-
is the
Or
sentence
if
is-
anything is broken,
If anything,
you
because
know?
why fix what's
Right.
not broken?
Right,
I mean,
right.
we do have some say in how our community develops, using good practices, what makes it desirable. The very fact that you do have a lot of nonconformities doesn't mean that they're wrong necessarily. In fact, that's how it grew organically over the years.
Agreed,
And
agreed, but I think-
ultimately, we can decide as a community, under the Planning Enabling Act, you know, if this will make our village a better place and make, you know, both aesthetically and, you know, from the point of view of the people living in the houses, that kind of thing, you know.
But one thing I do agree with the public that was mentioned today was, why is fences back in here? We already ruled on fences and sent it to council.
Just to create a comprehensive
Yeah.
Okay,
look
but I
at
don't,
it.
that's fine, I want to take a look at it, but I don't want to present anything to council that has fences related to it, because we already have done that.
Ooh, I disagree
Well,
with that.
Yeah, I've raised some additional issues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a new report on that.
I mean, we can always choose not to change anything, but
Yeah,
that's fair.
I specifically with fences, I have not made any recommendations. I have raised some additional questions for you
Okay,
to answer
Yep.
and debate. And maybe you'll come to the same conclusion, maybe you won't. But I think it's worth having the debate.
Agreed.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank
if you'd like then, we could walk through it.
Yeah.
Sort of,
Okay.
and
Well, in terms of the setback analysis, on page 1 of my letter, March 21st letter, the first thing I do is I convey what the current setback regulations are. For the principal dwelling, it's 30 feet in front. On the side, it's a minimum of 10 feet on either side, but the total of both setbacks has to be 25 feet. So in essence, it has to be 10 feet on one side and 15 feet on the other side, minimum. And on the side yard adjacent to a street, it has to be 30 feet. And then in the rear, the minimum rear yard setback is 40 feet. And then for garages, the setback is 10 feet. So that comes into play, as you'll see as we get through this. Now, I tell you a little bit how I did this analysis. I basically used Oakland County aerial photographs which show property lines. It's not a perfect way to do it, but it's good enough that it does show nonconformities. It's not exact down to the 10th of a foot or anything like that, but it's good enough to show where there are nonconformities.
yep,
In terms of the findings, going on to page 2, the residential side setback analysis. There's a lot of stuff here, but it's just, the tables are there just to show you where the nonconformities are. 9 residences, or about 24.3%, do not comply with the 10-foot minimum side setback on the left side. 8 residences, or 21.6%, do not comply with the 10-foot minimum side setback on the right side. And 10 residences, or about 27%, do not comply with the 25-foot minimum total of both sides requirement. So basically, we have about, looking at an overall perspective, about a quarter of the residences are not in compliance with the side setback requirements. So that's a pretty high percentage, really, in my mind. Then when you look at the rear yard setback analysis, 8 residences, or 21.6%, do not comply with the 40-foot minimum rear setback requirement. So what it suggests to me is that there may be property owners in the R3 district who wish to make improvements to their homes, but they're constrained by the setback requirements. And there are options that exist, and I suggest a few, like maybe eliminating the total of both sides side setback requirement. And another option is to reduce the 40-foot rear setback requirement. So for example, a reduction to just 30 feet in the rear would have a really substantial impact. It would affect, immediate effect for 6 properties where the existing rear setback is between 30 and 40 feet. So it would give a really a substantial impact, because a lot of people, when they do make improvements to their house, they're usually going to the rear most often. And we didn't address the front setback for a couple of reasons. One is we thought that the 30-foot front setback is appropriate for the district. And secondly, the likelihood that property owners will want to make improvements that it would expand towards the front is relatively small. And then we looked at the garages, the detached garages, and we found 12 detached garages in the R3 district. Interestingly, quite a few do not comply with the rear 10-foot rear yard setback, and the 4 of them, 33%, do not comply with the rear setback requirement, and 9, or 75%, do not comply with the 10-foot minimum side setback requirement. So the concern with detached garages is not necessarily expansion or renovation, as it is with the principal dwelling. It's what if they want to tear down the garage, or what if the garage is destroyed by some means, and they wanted to put it in the same footprint. They would have to get a variance or relocate the garage. And to relocate the garage, obviously, they would be taking up more of their rear yard, which they probably wouldn't want to do with the garage. And that would leave 10 feet in the side and in the rear of dead space. Do you see what I mean? The setback is basically behind the garage, and on the side is just unusable dead space.
Right.
So, in my mind, a reduction of 5 feet, since we've been living with these garages at a 5-foot setback for probably 100 years, it would make sense to reduce the 10-foot setback to 5 feet for the garages. It might not make much of a difference, except in those few cases where the garage is replaced or damaged beyond repair and has to be replaced for that reason.
And your suggestion is just for the garages, not for the main dwelling? To keep the 10 feet for a main dwelling, but a garage can go to 5?
Right,
Okay.
right. And that's just to make the best use of the ground, really, of the land. And then on page 2, at the bottom of page 2, I talk about the lot width analysis. And I really, this is just here for informational purposes more than anything else. I did a lot width analysis to, and found that, let's see here, 16 lots, or 43.2%, do not comply with the minimum lot width requirement. This is probably a key reason that many residents do not comply with the minimum side setback requirements. And it's revealing because on lots that are very narrow, some are only 50 or 60 feet in width, the existing setbacks allow a maximum building footprint of only about 1,375 to 1,925 square feet. So this imposes a constraint where the land is so expensive, where you have such a small building footprint, people want to spend money to build their houses out and make it, and get value out of their land. So that's where the rub comes, and they're hemmed in by the setbacks to some extent, I think. So we don't recommend any change to the lot width, but I'm just presenting it here to give you some perspective of where some of the problems come from. And then the fence analysis on page 3 is stuff that you've already seen. Quincy, you haven't seen it, but I present some information from the ordinance, the difference between a fence and a privacy screen. You may be familiar with it from,
zoning, it's,
yeah.
This is the original report you have not seen, the end conclusion.
This information's already in here. And
Dana.
Yeah, that needs to go to Dana.
That needs to go
I'm
to
sorry,
Dana
it's a point of
first.
Order,
Yep.
thank you.
And then it goes to Dana, and then Dana seeds it to us.
Yeah, we'll distribute that.
But anyway,
Thank you.
fences are basically 4 feet in height. Privacy screens are 6 feet in height. That's a big difference between them. Privacy screens are not supposed to be located in the required yard setback area, whereas fences can be located in the side or rear yard of a residential district. So there are some important distinctions between what's termed a fence and what's termed a privacy screen. So we went out in the R3 district, we located or identified where fence/privacy screens are located within the R3 district, and those are mapped on a map that's in here. It's the map that's on the historic district. It's labeled Historic District Map. And there are 6 of those fences identified, and I've numbered them on the bottom of page 3 and top of page 4. And all the fences appear to be 6 feet in height. So using that criterion alone, they would be considered privacy screens, but all the fences are on the property lines. But privacy screens are not supposed to be in the required setback areas. So there's that conflict between the height and where they're located. So there's a conflict there between where the privacy screens are and the height and so forth. So anyway, all 6 existing fences were likely constructed before the current fence regulations were adopted, so they are legally non-conforming. Nevertheless, their presence in the R3 district raises questions that the Planning Commission should consider. And here are the ones that I think that are worth debating. Given the small size of many of the lots in the R3 district, does it make sense to allow privacy screens on the property line? This would be just in the R3 district. On some lots, there simply is not a smaller, quote, selected use or area, unquote, to carve out that is not within the required setback area. Secondly, if the village were to allow privacy screens on the perimeter of lots in the R3 district, what restrictions would be necessary to avoid a compartmentalized look that would disrupt the cohesiveness and character of the historic district? And third, should the, excuse me, should the style be regulated if privacy screens are permitted on the perimeter of lots. And this may be a Historic District Commission question. I raised this question because I'd be concerned about the appearance of the historic district if a multitude of stockade fences were erected in the district. So I throw those questions out. I think they're worth debating, and I don't come to any conclusions with respect to the fence/privacy screen issue at this point.
Okay, all right. So I guess we can have some discussion on this. Would anybody like to make any comments?
Well, I don't know if you looked to see if how many actually legally conforming privacy screens are there? Are there a lot of privacy screens that are within the current ordinance, or are the only privacy screens really these ones that you find on the private property line?
I don't think there are any legally, legal privacy screens in the R3 district.
Okay.
I think they're all on the property line, and they're all non-conforming at this point.
Right. So no one's putting up privacy screens otherwise, except keeping ones that are essentially legally non-conforming?
That's correct.
Good question.
Yeah, it is correct. It's not a back and forth conversation, so let's stay focused on the discussion related to
Agreed. All right, yeah, Paul, we're gonna say something?
So, yeah, no, so with that new information, with these questions, given the small size of lots in R3, does it make sense to allow privacy screens on property line? So, specifically focused on these three questions for our discussion, for the first one, I kind of would say no, it does not make sense to me to allow privacy screens because it disrupts the natural look of what we have in the village already. To put a privacy screen at 6 feet, that means you have to be above 6 feet to look down on the street and see like all the houses there. Next being, the village were to allow them in the R3 district, what restrictions would be necessary? They'd have to be 4 feet. And at that point, they're not privacy screens. So, and again, my opinion for the same reasoning, it disrupts the natural beauty that we have with the nature in the village, which is why to keep its historical characteristic, part of the master plan that we have there, keeping things natural. And lastly, the last question, I agree, it should be a question of a historic district if we do allow it, because designs and like that, everything, that's up to them. Now, the only workaround I can think of through all of this is if you want to have a privacy screen, put up arborvitaes.
Pardon? I didn't.
Put up arborvitaes.
Agreed.
Oh, I see.
Because it keeps the natural look,
Is a good-
keeps the natural look, you can get a 10-footer for $200.
Yep.
And you can put it along your property line regardless, and it doesn't have to have a setback, it's a natural green, and it's there year-round.
So I definitely, like the points that you raised, but what if we had more of a middle ground thought of 4-foot fences have to maintain, what's the O to C, like 60% opening? What if we have a 4-foot privacy fence? That would still allow, like you said, you could still view, but because of the additional limitations of those lots, if you're mind sitting on my patio, I can sit in my chair and I'm not gonna look at my neighbor doing whatever. But you can look around and you can see everything, but maybe there's like a middle ground area.
I would love to find a middle ground, thanks for bringing that up, because the only thing I was concerned about is at least they can't be the white picket fence. If you're gonna do something like that, it has to be natural wood colors.
Right, because I think the fence that's like wrought iron,
Yep.
wood, stone, or something.
Something stylish, but again, that's a decision I think we should leave the historic district, just, we won't have to, I don't think we should have a say in that, because of the district.
Of the material or of
Of the
size?
material, the style, the size, I think it should be 4 feet. If we're doing anything, I think 4.5 feet is perfect, because again, with the sit-down right there, also without having anything over 4 feet, let's say you have a bonfire in your backyard after you call the police department, or the fire department, let them know you're getting burning, that, cool, if there is an issue, your neighbors can see it. You can see there's a fire issue if there is, if it's above 6 feet, you won't see it till it's too late.
Do we have now, Chris, the existing, opacity, shadow box fences? I believe we do have material requirements in our
Right.
ordinance, right?
Yes, we
And I
do.
think the historic district does, or the historic guideline booklet does as well.
Yes.
Do do you recall, Chris, what our see-through factor is on a 4-foot fence?
I'll look it up.
For some reason, I
Okay.
thought it was like 60 or something like that.
I'm not
I don't know if
sure.
that.
I'll look it up.
60 what?
60% of it is open, but you can see through it.
Okay, right.
So I think that was the, or maybe it was the
Like
other
we-
way around. Maybe it was 40.
Some people get around by that by doing the picket,
The
like the
slat.
big picket fence, it's alternating planks on each
slats,
side.
yeah.
Cause the slots, cause
Or
technically
you
you
can
can look
slant
through it.
them, so you only see through kind of one direction.
Yeah.
Sure.
Quincy, just to clarify, you're saying if we do the 4 feet on the perimeter, right? That's what you're saying?
Right. It's
Okay,
a, it's
I
a
just want to
4
make
foot.
sure I was.
Well, I mean, we
understanding.
can do 4 foot on the perimeter right now.
Yeah.
You just can't do a privacy 4
Fence
foot.
on, okay, so that's where we're saying.
A full,
Okay.
a fully.
Opaque.
Opaque,
not
yes.
see-through.
Yep,
So-
that would be the change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by
That's,
privacy,
that
you mean,
vehemently, I'm against anything that's opaque like that. You cannot do that in the historic district.
Of
Like solid.
any height?
Any height solid. around
that's
the
what I
perimeter.
was just asking for clarification on. Is that your,
So
That's
the,
my
uh,
opinion. I'm
The
not sure if it's
opacity of
allowed.
a perimeter feature shall not exceed 40%, except that the opacity of perimeter features constructed of stone or other natural materials
what was it,
shall
40?
be 50%.
Okay, okay,
But this is what I was saying, the workaround is doing something like a 10-foot arborvitae because that
Sure.
can move with the wind, but it's pretty opaque in the summer.
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
I mean, you don't have your looking and your neighbors to see a fire, you don't have your view further around, but it is natural and.
That's the natural thing, yeah,
Right.
so.
I agree, like, so when I read this, I agree with Paul that I sort of read it as like a historic and a zoning thing. Like, that's how I read it.
Yep.
And, like, I understood, like, seeing the percents were like a little bit like, oh, 75% don't, you know, comply with this. Those are very large percents. We definitely need to look at like making sure we're being mindful. But I thought, for the same questions, I was on the same page of, I thought a lot of this for this district, I would at least want their feedback on how they are viewing it in terms of that communication, because I do think they have so much more of that historic knowledge of all of that, that would be something I think super important to incorporate into that thought process.
Like actual, some type of feedback or,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I think their
survey.
knowledge base is so
Yeah,
important in
yeah.
this scenario.
Especially, like, I would love to hear from a resident who's lived there for 40 years,
Right,
basically.
yeah, I had
In the historic
the same
district.
thought. Ultimately, it's about, of course, it's sort of like, you know, Supreme Court looking over what's good for everybody, and individual states being able to have their freedoms. You know, what are these overriding or generally accepted guidelines to make aesthetic qualities be favorable for a historic district? Yep. While giving them the freedom to do things that they want to do. And obviously, with these high levels of nonconformity, you can see that these have benefits. You know, they provide quality of life for the people who have them. So the sort of having some, I guess, one thought that we could do, short of a full-blown focus group or something like that, would be that we familiarize ourselves well. I've had the good fortune of working many times in the historic district, intimately with the properties. To me, it's always been pleasant, and I like that. Ferndale, you have 35-foot lots. They just reduced it from 40 to 35, and you have 5-foot setbacks. You know, real tight. The houses are real tight. And, you know, the way that Franklin grew, the history of Franklin, it was very organic, and so we have a lot of nonconformities and a lot of variety in the historic district. You know, trying to understand what makes a historic district special is very subjective and subtle, and perhaps we could get some input from our historic district commission. I could make efforts to invite Gary or one of the representatives there. We could have a bit of a mutual discussion.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Like
As
an
long as-
unusual discussion outside of our regular meeting, or invite Gary to a regular meeting to have this?
I think both.
I agree with both, just because him having it on the
So
record.
if Stuart's good with that, I'll chat with him, and
Yeah.
I think we could try to arrange that. I can talk to Gary and see what his thoughts are, of who would be someone who could represent here to help us with this. But I also think, yeah, whatever, I would recommend maybe that we begin by taking a stroll individually on your free time and taking a look. I've always felt that it's, you know, nothing ever jumps out at me when I'm down there. I've had folks ask me, can I do something with this little structure? And I'm like, boy, you know, it's right on the property line. We gotta talk about that and think about it. And they're getting rickety, and they're charming, you know, they're charming little structures. And you'd hate for them to have to forego rebuilding something like that. So, there's a lot of points to be considered. I think maybe, if we can revisit this at our next meeting.
I agree. I think it'd be better to revisit this after we get input from the Historic Commission. Have other commissioners join us in the discussion as well, that we get on the same page, and then move forward from there. So really have an answer for council by July.
Yeah, that
Realistic-
seems fair.
realistically?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely fair. And like I said, there is no like single motivating issue that
Sure.
leads to the study. You know, as Chris
It's an
expanded it from just fences, it really just became, it's my understanding that they became more aware of how many nonconformities were
Yeah,
existing
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And it's our job to make sure that, you know, the ordinance is doing its job there. So I don't think we're on any kind of time crunch to get back, and I think collaboration between HDC, since this is their district too, could be really helpful. Also, you know, Gary himself is a wealth of knowledge, longtime Franklin resident,
Yeah.
has that great perspective. So I can see that being really healthy in adding to this conversation. So maybe like for moving forward, I would have you circle in with Stuart, and then we'll coordinate. I'd love to sit in those as well, just so I can communicate back up through council to kind of where we're at. So,
Great.
and then maybe you or Stuart or all of us and Gary meet and sort of talk about Chris's findings here, and invite Gary to come back to a meeting and sort of share his input on the record.
But I did want to mention, I was not kidding about the deadline of trying to do July, just so we don't have this on our docket until December.
I appreciate that.
I really
Yes.
want there to be a deadline in July. so we can
Yeah, I
get this
like
done.
that, okay.
I do have one quick, I guess, maybe Quincy, you can offer some information on this. So I was looking at the garage setback analysis that Chris did.
Yeah.
And I know that you can go through the zoning process, and I know that you had looked at, you know, some of the, sort of reducing some of the setback requirements. What if, I guess, if something happened, I'm just thinking, we have so many trees, if a tree fell on someone's garage and they had to replace it, what is, I guess, the likelihood? Do we need to really address this? Because I can't imagine if I had to do that, what a
Currently-
nightmare that
I
would be.
I know you asked, Chris, I can answer this. Currently, right now, as is, the house is destroyed, it needs to be rebuilt, it needs to be rebuilt as is with the materials as best you can. Otherwise, they can request a variance to move it if needed.
Just the garage?
Just the garage.
Okay.
Just the garage.
So it would be as is in that exact location?
As is in that exact
Okay.
location, unless they ask for a variance, like, hey, we know it's right here, we know how
They
to.
would be
That
required
is-
to get a variance.
Yeah,
That-
I think-
but regardless, it's a
I think
variance.
if they do anything that is current, that would be within a setback, even if they're changing a roof direction, they would still have to get a variance.
Correct.
And we recently had one where, so it would be right at the corner of, what is it, Carroll and what's the first street over there? But they wanted to add,
Kelvin.
they have a single car garage, they wanted to add a second car garage.
Okay.
So one of the things that zoning board always seems to look at is parity with the neighborhood, where there's, I think, 3 other houses on that small little cut street, and each of them have 2 car garages. So I think that then kind of speaks to the issue of like, if all the existing ones are already non-conforming, maybe there is some issue there, because you want to look to be in parity with everything. So like, you don't wanna have one house that's a 6-car garage and you're all of a sudden limited to a 2-car garage or whatever. But they're all roughly similar, because like you go through that, and you mentioned, you walk through the neighborhood, nothing sticks out. So like, if most of the houses have a 2-car garage, here's a 1, you make it a 2, it doesn't really stick out.
Okay.
So those were some of the issues that we've
Yeah.
had in that.
Okay,
historic
I just
district.
want to get in the mindset, so
Right.
that way I had it.
And,
when
and then
we're
also
looking
with
at
To
that,
address,
historic district came, they always weighed in on anything that we did
to
too.
address Sarah's question in a little bit more detail, when you have a non-conforming structure and it's damaged, there's a provision in the ordinance that says, should such structure be destroyed by any means to an extent of more than 50% of its estimated cash value, it shall be reconstructed only in conformity with the provisions of the zoning code.
Okay.
Right,
So you
right.
would,
So
in
if
that
a
case-
piece of wood is rotting, you can replace it. If
Yeah.
it, but, right, you get to a
Well,
threshold
no, it
point.
was, that one you guys had, it was like piece by piece, and there was a variance and outcry, that was like
Yeah,
overrun
well,
with horse fence.
With the fencing issues is where that comes in, because we've had several issues where people wanted to replace the entire fence. It was legally non-conforming, it allows for repair. At what point is repair replacement?
And it's
there
the
was
50%.
lots
Is that the general?
Well, that was
Well,
for
that's-
damage, so that was different than.
That's
That's damage,
different.
that's like
Yeah.
where the tree falls on your
Right, this is like-
garage and destroys it.
You're allowed to maintain a legally non-conforming fence, but at what point are you no longer maintaining it if you're replacing it?
And we've been looking at that extensively and just rooting it up through state law is where we are, because our ordinance is unclear. So in 1264.04, it does allow you to have a non-conforming structure. You can repair that structure, and it even says replace as long as it doesn't change in size, nature, or material. And then, but then also in the nonconformity, there's a line in the ordinance that says that, it's not the intent to encourage the survival or whatever
Right,
those.
right.
So that is fishy there. So when we look at those specific issues, we often have to root it all the way up to state case law to see at what point are you actually abandoning the structure, and then that's considered a brand new replacement versus a repair/replacement.
Right. So if you're replacing pickets on a fence, do you do 50% value before you have to talk to anybody?
This discussion's kind of come up, there's really no
There's no-
If
right
you-
line.
Well, it sounds like we have a 50% value.
That's
That was
fence.
only destruction.
That's, yeah,
Fences were
That's
kind of
just-
different, it's kind of,
yeah.
Well,
It's the kind of part that.
yeah, and that's why
Okay.
people come to get variances, because they want to do some replacement, but at that point, if you just get a variance, you'd be okay.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how it was going.
So in your mindset, is this something that maybe we look at then to address?
Well, it seems like you're limiting the ability of people to have any sort of privacy fence in the historic district if the only, or at least most of the only ones that are existing are legally non-conforming.
well,
So if no one else is taking any action, do they not want privacy fences, or are they so limited by the ordinance that they're not allowed to take any action unless they seek a variance?
yeah.
And they don't want to seek a variance because then,
So that's the question we asked. Do you not have a
Right.
privacy fence because of the ordinance, or because
Right.
you just don't want one?
so a
Right.
discussion with
Right.
these people from the historic commission, I think could provide,
Okay.
some.
Right.
additional-
And that's where, like, maybe they do want a privacy fence. Maybe it would require a variance. And does the historic and aesthetic character of the village weigh upon that calculation? That's a difficult one.
It
But-
is.
but
I
we're-
do
but-
think,
important,
it's an
though.
important one. I do think it does have a significance on it, but, I feel like we need to get all the other input before we move down. this
Yeah,
road.
and that's where
So
the,
That's kind of.
try to take some special attention to our own little village, and boy, if you venture out into other areas, take a look, try to think about it. I think it would be helpful.
Like I said, the closest place I feel like we have to downtown Frankfurt is downtown Farmington.
Yeah,
That's, for me, that's it.
hop, skip, and a jump, yep, parts of, trying to think
I don't know
of
if we're
the
done
other.
with fences, but I don't know if this discussion also warrants discussion about the side yard setbacks that we mentioned with like garages. I mean,
Yeah.
we discussed the fences, but we're also going to discuss
Yeah, it's open
garages. Do we
for
wanna
everything.
touch on that or close the fences first and then?
No, that's a really good point, Quincy. I think that I'm under the impression that with the memo to now expand the scope of what we were looking at when we continue down these conversations, we'll be addressing not just fences, but also side setbacks, the garages, everything that Chris has presented here
Yeah.
to kind of get a comprehensive
Yeah,
view
and there's
of
no
it.
reason why we can't do it right now if you have,
Yeah.
if you have something you,
No, it seems like, yeah, there's,
I just
the report
don't,
has expanded, that we
Yes.
can at least touch on these and see.
Yep.
Like, we want more feedback, we know with fences, we can't go much further, so.
Well, I'm just,
And so we may want something similar with garages, probably, to include both those
yeah,
discussions
yeah,
together,
absolutely.
so.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
Thank you,
so,
Chris, it's good information here.
yeah,
You're
very
welcome.
good stuff to think about. So Natalia, I want to have you have your full opportunity to give us your thoughts, but, you know, keep it quick.
Yes,
I'm
thank
happy to hear you.
Since I'm the only one who, I'm assuming living in historic district, so I can provide
Yep.
some feedback. And because our property has one of the smaller lots in historic district, so we know all of these difficulties, but at the same time, I want to point out at the fence ordinances, obstruction of use of adjoining property. That's a very important one when you consider the changes. As of right now, we have new fence less than 2 feet from our property, which makes difficult to maintain. And even engineering company could not place the proper equipment when they need it in that space.
Yep.
And that therefore, we have ordinances that says no fence shall be erected where it should prevent or unreasonably obstruct the use of or access to adjacent property. The building official may require a fence to be set back up to 2 feet from a driveway or property. So that's why when our neighbor went 3 times to ZBA, it was denied because for one, this was an important reason why, because it was so close to our property, and they have the ZBA determined the neighbor had enough of setback per ordinances, which is 10 feet, which not every property have to do 10 feet. They can ask ZBA 5, 3. ZBA will look at each case separately, and they will make determination how many feet that setback should be. So this is one important when you look at all of that and consider when you do your review. At the same time, my husband and I, we invited village officials, ZBA commissioners to our property to see for themselves what it's like, how it's going to prevent our family to escape when there is a fire, safety concern, because we have windows there, main windows actually, family room, kitchen, bedroom, dining room. And unfortunately, no one had a desire to do it. I will give to a clerk, since this is a procedure, some of the pictures, so you will take a look. Maybe this picture will show you what our view from the windows, how this is all living in historic district with this close proximity of 6-foot privacy fence, especially when the wrong side is facing you. So I will give that, but also please keep in mind another thing is for those who has such a small space to maintain the side of the house and everything. But mainly it's safety, as we spoke at the last meetings. You probably remember it was major concern of ours. And as you just discussed, when there is open burning, you cannot open the windows, burning fire. People doing in historic district, you cannot open the windows. The smoke just goes, even if it's 4 homes away from your home. So this is another concern, but that's separate issue. But when there's a wooden fence so close to your house, and then there's a grill, which we don't have also ordinances in the historic district for that, how many feet from a structure we should have it, and smoker, then it's an issue for the fire hazard. And let me just say, if, God forbid, there is a fire in historic district, one of the homes, it's going to be a disaster for the whole historic district. So that's why I'm speaking.
I just have a few questions. I don't mean to cut you off, because I
Sure.
know we're getting,
I'm
we've
sorry.
had this discussion before, I know.
Yes.
Have you requested the village to send out the building enforcement for that fence behind your house?
Behind?
You said the fence is
Next to your house.
next to your house where that fence is. Has the building enforcement have come, ordinance enforcement come out to look at that fence?
Yes.
Okay, what was the determination?
Remove the fence and build as per, go to ZBA.
Okay,
And at every ZBA meeting, building officials stated that fence reached the point, and you'll see in the pictures, that it's no longer can be repaired. So and that's another, I'll answer, but before I forget, this is another point, why this fences were not taken care of. There's not enough space, it's on a property line, to go on without trespassing to your neighbor.
it's got to be reported by neighbors, otherwise enforcement doesn't know when to come out to look at it and enforce it. It has to be reported. If it wasn't reported when it was disrepair, it won't be fixed and enforced.
Right.
So
We
if the
reported
enforcement
for
has
4
come out
years.
there, I don't mean to cut you off, but
Yes,
I'm just
I'm
trying to
sorry.
say, if enforcement has come out there and reviewed it and made a declaration, then the fence hasn't been repaired by the owner, then that's another report you need to make as a
We
resident
did.
to the enforcement to have them come out again and issue a ticket to the homeowner.
Sir, it was ignored 4 years. We have all
That's all we can do,
documentation.
Because when we do, we have already done the fence ordinance, like, review and sent it. We understand. It's just, we can't do anything more regarding this specific subject. We've already sent it off, it's been reviewed, and I hate to say it, but it's almost like we're beating a dead horse here.
No, that part I agree, but the neighbor replaced the fence without going with the permit, or completely new fence without going with the permits, ZBA or HDC approval.
Okay, so again, that-
And again, we
So-
emailed and nothing happening.
all right, so Meg, with that being done,
I've responded to Natalia's emails multiple times.
One time.
I have given, we get a FOIA request every 2 weeks,
So-
and I've furnished all the notices and everything that we can over there. This is not the appropriate venue
So
to
then that-
deal
no,
with
wait,
the
stop there,
code
stop there.
enforcement.
So that being said, I did agree, that's why I asked what was done. It'd be better for the complaints now to be done at the village council meetings.
Yes.
Because we
Right.
have no authority.
No,
over
no,
here to
no,
do
and
it.
I'm not saying, sorry, sir, I'm not right now bringing up what you should do about this.
No, I know, but what
I'm,
you're asking and letting us know, we have no say in it anymore.
Right.
It's already been sent off 3 months ago. It's been reviewed by the
Right.
council,
I,
and it just.
and I agree.
I empathize with you, I really do, I understand, because the safety issue is a big thing with me as well. We can't do anything.
Right. The only thing I had an issue with McKenna reports between the now and before, where I'll read just two
yeah,
sentences,
we got it.
where it's stated, based on the above observation, we do not recommend change it to defense regulation. This desire to preserve the character and the look of the historic district should take precedence over the desire for a taller fence.
And that is correct, because if the change happens, then the change that is affecting you will stay in place. So the recommendation of not changing
Right.
fences is good right now. So,
All right.
so we
Any-
got
any-
there, but
Yep.
we gotta move.
Any
Yes.
closing comments? I
Right,
think
so
we're good.
please consider that part of the ordinances that I just read, and please consider how someone, if a new fences will be built, whatever you decide, 6-foot privacy fence, 4 feet,
Every fence going forward, regardless where it is, has to have a permit and a variance approved by zoning, no matter what.
Okay. All right, Natalia, thank you so much. We
not in our
appreciate
case.
it.
Thank you.
Wanna-
Okay, I'll just give this.
Okay.
Please do, and she'll submit it out to us.
All right, so I think we can go ahead and move on to our next item. this is our new business and our annual report. Maybe Chris, you could walk us through it?
Well, this is something that also is required by state law, and
Yep.
it basically says what you did in 2024. And if you're comfortable with what's reflected here, the proper action to be taken would be to forward it to the village council, because that's what is called for.
Yep, all right. So, in my review of this, I thought it was very thorough and well done, covered all the ground that I was aware of. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts on the presentation and the content?
No, I think it was very well organized, very concise, very clear and cut.
Yep, yep.
The only thing I would say is the addition of, I know we have Daniel Ferris appointed council in 25, Albert Ludwig also left in 2025.
So true. That's a good catch.
That's the only thing I could see different. And then, for sake of that, we're adding that, I guess we add Quincy for 2025.
Well, this is actually reflecting.
And Jeremy.
But it's,
2024.
oh, that's a good
This is
point, Chris.
2024. yeah.
Oh, 2024, okay. There you go. Thank you.
Can I just say, as, you know, I wasn't with you guys your whole year last year, but after reviewing your report and looking at some of this, I mean, for a planning commission, you guys have really looked at some big ordinances and done a lot of work over the last year. We all know that we don't propose amendments to this in one night. It takes multiple sessions, a lot of discussion, at times a lot of community feedback. And when I look at some of these rather meaty issues that you were dealing with last year, I think that it's impressive the way that you've moved that through a volunteer planning commission here. Definitely providing a great service to the village. So we're really thankful for all of that hard work, and I know that it doesn't happen overnight, and that a lot of times it's on an agenda and back on an agenda and again, but I appreciate this. It's great to see it all in one place. When we present it to council, I'll make sure that either Chris is there or that Stuart is there, so that we can actually walk them through it a little more than just attaching it, because I think it's important to pay homage to some of the work that was done in the past year.
Great,
Thank you.
yep.
The only thing I didn't see, and I didn't know if you wanted it included, I thought that Pete did a really great job just bringing in the knowledge about Pickering, whether or not, you know, we actually took action on it. I think it led to a lot of knowledge that was grown, not only about the importance of historic structures, but sort of it got the ball moving also on thinking about how we can use spaces in our village. And that was the only thing I saw that I was like, I don't know if we can include this or where it would fit. But I thought that the work done on it in terms of looking at it as a collaborative and community engagement thing was actually, it was really cool, and I wanted to spotlight it because I know I was really inspired by a lot of the work that came out of it. But that was it. I thought otherwise it was very well presented, and I learned a lot and was really proud reading it. So thank you for putting it together.
A second point about Pete with Pickering, that's
Yeah,
true.
agreed.
His,
I can
despite
add
the
that.
fact of the outcome of it, you're 100% correct. He was able to do the, working together for multiple different boards, putting it together, and a lot of community outreach, surprisingly.
Yeah, you did great.
Yeah,
A
great.
lot of collaborative work within the community too. The way that we were able to get different factions of community working together, rowing in one direction. It's not something that always happens in Franklin, and we saw that with Pickering Barn, and they're really using that model to look at the green. So I agree with Sarah's point, you know, that's a huge engagement that we had over here.
When you get started on the green,
Yeah.
unofficially, I want to jump in on that.
Okay?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I played baseball in that
That's
field
great.
for 20 years and
Right,
like
right.
soccer, and I fell off the play structure there multiple times. I got trapped in that barn in the way back corner when I was a kid. Like, a lot of horrible memories of it. Oh, and the sledding hill. You're not
Oh, the
have
sledding
your kids
hill.
gone down the hill yet?
Oh, of course.
Okay, good. Have they like been hit by a toboggan?
You always get hit by somebody, or
Okay,
we,
'cause I was
or
saying-
we take
My
out
friends,
somebody.
my friends and I were talking, like, you're not a real Franklinite until you get hit with a toboggan going down the hill.
We use tubes though, so at least when we hit people,
This
it's
was a
safer to hit
metal,
them.
this was a wood metal toboggan, and we're talking, we got blood. Like, it was, 90s were rough.
So, all right, well, that's great.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, if you wanted to add the statements that Sarah brought up,
Yep,
I
I'll do
would
that.
fully support it.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I think, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, wonderful. Great meeting.
Planning Commission.
I got 5 minutes to make tea.